Your therapist could be the trigger for your dissociation.
In my head.
Hey everyone, so I'm out here, I'm chasing down the sun, it's getting dark and I'm trying to do this video as quickly as I can, but I'm here to talk today about dissociation during therapy. What does it look like? How do we know what's happening? What do we do when it is happening? I think it's probably more common than we realize, so let's talk about it. So when we go to therapy, it's not always an easy thing to do, and the first place where we might start noticing dissociation is actually before we even go to therapy. And a quick little recap on what dissociation is. Dissociation is when you feel like you're not connected to your body, which would be depersonalization, or you don't feel connected to reality, which would be derealization. And it doesn't have to be very extreme. It could just be that you kind of feel a little foggy-headed, you might forget things, which is dissociative amnesia. So it's this feeling of not being connected, not being totally present. And that's a problem in therapy because when you're not totally present in therapy, a lot of the work that you should be doing can't get done because you're not there to experience it and you're not fully digesting your entire experience. So before therapy even starts, before we head off to therapy, we may feel very stressed. Dissociation typically is part of trauma, and when we've been traumatized, we become overwhelmed with stress and our body kind of shuts down, and that's why we're experiencing dissociative symptoms. So we want to notice before we even go to therapy, are we feeling a little too overwhelmed about it? Are we getting anxious? Do we get worked up? And is there something that we can do before therapy even starts to kind of calm ourselves down? And a little bit later, I'll talk about grounding, which is something that you can do. If you find that you're constantly uncomfortable during therapy and you just are not clicking with your therapist, that may be something to discuss with them. You may need a referral to a different therapist who maybe doesn't trigger you so much into having dissociative symptoms. For example, if you're not with a trauma therapist, somebody who specializes in trauma, they may not necessarily understand what dissociation is and understand why you're experiencing this, and so you're never going to get past this block, and you may need somebody who gets it a little bit better. Or you just may not click with the therapist that you have. A common thing I think when we go to therapy is feeling like we can't open up to this person. It's a scary situation to begin with because we're opening up all of our vulnerabilities to somebody. And if we don't feel like we can trust this person, we may start to dissociate because it becomes overwhelming and stressful to talk about the things that they're asking us to talk about. Now, we should be aware that when we go in to see a therapist, for a lot of us, they're going to feel like an authority figure. They're going to feel like somebody who knows more than us, who has more power over us than we have over ourselves, because they're going to understand our minds better than we do. And that can be very threatening, and that could be a reason why we're dissociating in the first place. So we should be aware, if we had an authority figure in our past that maybe did something that traumatized us, very often this is going to be parents. Maybe we had a male parent that abused us. We may not be so good around a male therapist, and that's something to be aware of. We may need to be referred out to a female therapist, and vice versa. If a female in our life, a sister, an aunt, a mother, a grandmother, traumatized us, then we may not want to see a female therapist. We may need to see a male therapist, and that's okay. That's totally fine to discuss with your therapist. Any good therapist should be open and welcoming to you discussing these things. It may not be that there's a problem with your therapist. It may be that something that you're discussing is a little bit too much to handle, and so the topic is bringing on so much overwhelming stress that you dissociate, and that's something else you'll also want to talk about with the therapist. A good therapist will be okay with discussing this and working through it and finding out exactly what is it that's triggering you to dissociate in the first place, and how can we approach this topic in a way that you can process it and move forward in a way that you don't dissociate, that it's not so overwhelming. And the therapist can kind of become like a surrogate person who checks in on your stress. Maybe you're not so good at observing your own stress level, but the therapist can observe it in you. They can notice, like, when we talk about this, your posture kind of closes down and your breathing gets shallow. I had a therapist do this for me, and it was really helpful because she pointed out things to me that I didn't know were even alarming to me. I didn't know that they were threatening, and that helped me to deal with the dissociation on my own, because when I came home from therapy, I could think about, like, okay, why is this situation so triggering for me? Why do I have difficulty with this? And I was able to do the work not only in therapy, but progress even further at home. So one way to know that you've been dissociating in therapy is that you don't remember chunks of the therapy, you don't remember what was going on, or maybe when you're asked questions, you kind of have to have the therapist repeat them, or you don't know exactly what they said and you kind of give an answer because you think it's the right answer, but you haven't really focused enough to be able to know what you should be saying. Not that there's a right thing to say, but maybe you just didn't hear the question correctly and you feel bad making them say it again, so you just kind of say whatever. You may find that you just get generally uncomfortable with the questions. You start giving like one-word answers, you close down, you feel like you're disconnecting, like you can't quite focus on anything. When you go home, you don't really know what the point of the therapy was. You might feel like it's not working. And again, this is all indications that you could be dissociating, and you should bring it up with the therapist so that you can come up with a plan to tackle the dissociation, because very often, unfortunately, if we haven't dealt with the dissociation, it's hard to move forward with any other symptoms that we may be experiencing, like anxiety or depression. Now, if you find that you are dissociating, your therapist should be able to help you with that in the moment, right there in the room, and they should give you some tools that you could use when you go home. And the typical way that we deal with dissociation is through grounding. Grounding is simply bringing your mind back in connection with your body and in the present moment that you're experiencing right here, right now. A common way to do that is to observe things in your environment. So right now around me, I'm going to turn the camera around and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if I wanted to ground myself in this environment, I could look for things that are yellow, and I can see there's plenty of boxes over there with X's and O's and numbers on them that are yellow. In the background, I see that there's a yellow curb, and these panels are a little bit yellow, and basically I'm just describing my environment. I could also look at the shapes that are in my environment. I could notice the smells. Right now it smells kind of outdoorsy. There's some mulch on the ground. I kind of smell that. I could also listen to what am I hearing. So I'm hearing a lot of different kinds of bugs. I hear there's a bug close by, there's a bug in the distance. You could also taste. I don't really taste anything here, but if you happen to be in an environment where there's a lot of smells, like a restaurant, you can kind of taste the smells, and basically you're just connecting back to where you are. You might be able to do this in a therapist's office using something like candles or music or sounds or the therapist's voice, or feeling your feet against the floor and feeling where you are. Sensations are really what you're going for to bring yourself back into your body so that your mind is not kind of floating away. I know it can get really worrying to think that your therapist could be the trigger for your dissociation, and it might be scary to go into therapy, but I want you to know that it is normal, it is common, you can deal with this. Find somebody who understands how to treat dissociation and who can help you, and you can always practice at home these grounding techniques. I want to thank you for being here. If you're new, subscribe. I do mental health videos. I've got over 250 here on the channel. And if you'd like to support me in what I'm doing here in my mission of humanizing mental health, head on over to Patreon. You can support me over there. I'll put the link above. I'd love to hear from you. What has it been like for you experiencing dissociation during therapy? How have you handled it? Have you discussed these things with your therapist? Let me know in the comments down below so we can all learn from each other here in the community. As always, thank you for being here. I'll see you around, everyone.